Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Historia Politica Publica. In the episode of today, I will talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson and his essay Self-Reliance, which was published in 1841. Ralph Waldo Emerson was writing during the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. He was one of the founding members of the philosophy which was called Transcendentalism. This philosophy was born in part as a reaction against Unitarianism, which was the major religion in the area of Massachusetts at that time. Ralph Waldo Emerson, alongside other people like Henry David Thoreau, which I have talked about him in previous episode, they used to work there, they used to study and join together in different gatherings. The thing is, like in the 1830s, they create a group which was, I think it was called something like the Transcendental Club, in which they discuss how this idea of Unitarianism, which they agree in some part because it was this religion that enhanced the idea of the community and so on, they reject that they impose dogma as any other religion. Nevertheless, the Transcendentalism advocate for the self-reliance of each person, the own creativity of every person, the possibility to think about the different ideas of life, to have your own opinions. Even though you were living in society, you had not to live yourself upon the fate of the masses. So the thing is, like in 1836, when Emerson organized the first meeting of the Transcendental Club, he published his essay Nature, which it was the first text about transcendentalism and speaks about how nature and the humans must merge together, how it is important for humans to live in the present, because as nature, we cannot be based on the past or think too far in the future. It is better to kind of enjoy the moments, similar of the carpe diem idea, in order to live your life fully. He uses the example of the flowers or the leaves. Like the leaves in autumn, they have this red, yellowish brown color, and in summer they have the green one. And that doesn't mean that in autumn the leaves have a bad color or in summer. But the thing is, for Emerson, the important is to live every moment that you are going through. Apart from that, in 1841, Self-Reliance was published, which is the essay that I'm going to talk now. And in that club, it was also Henry David Thoreau, which, as I mentioned in the episode, I think it was the 46, 45. I dedicate 5 episodes to him, but the thing is, like, he published in 1848 the essay that was later called Civil Disobedience. So you can understand how in the 1830s, 1840s, this transcendental idea of looking the strength in your inner self was important. It was the context, a part of the kind of backlash against Unitarianism. There were 2 events that especially influenced the readings of Thoreau, which were the War on Mexico. This was an invasion of the United States in 1845 to annex Texas, and the year later started the war against Mexico that ended in 1848, and the United States, they ended conquering some territories in the south part of the region. Apart from that, the slavery system was imposed in the society, and Thoreau was completely against that, as all the other transcendentalists. This was the time of the abolitionist movement, with people like John Brown trying to lead the slave rebellion. John Brown was this white guy who joined the black slaves and wanted to emancipate themselves. Eventually, he was killed. Henry David Thoreau wrote a letter in, well, it was more, he gave a speech, and after it was translated into a letter, 1859, in Massachusetts, in which he demanded the liberation of John Brown. It was called a plea to Captain John Brown. And his idea was that this was a person who had really kind of understand the importance of to be human, wanted to risk his life for save the slaves, and eventually he paid for that. He paid for his bravery with his life. But going back to Ralph Waldo Emerson, which was like the mentor of Henry David Thoreau and all the other transcendentalists, he was the oldest one and also the kind of, let's say, the leader, even though he was specific that everybody must follow his path. In his essay, Self-Reliance, some of the most important points are when he said that it's essential to do something good for itself and not for seek prize. He gives the example of the philanthropists who are donating kind of money in order to feel good with themselves and to seek the approbation and the admiration of the society. For that, Emerson criticized those people because you have to do your own actions, the thing that you believe are right, not to seek the praise among others, but rather because they are good in itself. In that sense, he always advocates this idea of following your consciousness. What you think is right, it will be like that. The exact sentence of Emerson regarding that is like, yes, is that one quote. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of birds and sages. End quote. In other words, it doesn't matter what other people tell to you, what society, religion, the kind of elites in your area where you are living for, your family are trying to tell you. It is important that you realize your own ideas about society. The thing is, like in this essay, he doesn't seem to take into account the kind of influence that we have been taking since we were child and have shaped our perception of the world. However, in the essay that he wrote in 1860, is called Fate, he seems that after 19 years after Self-Reliance, he was able to emphasize more the importance of the material conditions in our surroundings. But that will later on, because in this essay he explains the fable of the sod, in which he points how a vagabond sadly was living in the streets, was taken to a house, and he became a prince because he believed so. And he gave this importance to the mind. This prince was, this vagabond was being told that he was a prince, he was carried on a palace, and that everything beforehand had been a dream. And eventually, this story tells that this person started to behave as a prince because he had been transferred there. And Emerson mentions that was because he thought that was a prince, he was able to behave like that. But reading nowadays this, it seems also that Emerson was implying, although it seems not in purpose, that in this story, the most important thing is not that the vagabond believed that he was a prince, but rather that he was transferred into the palace, and henceforth being surrounded by all the kind of facilities, accommodations, rich and good stuff that Prince was enjoying, he was able to behave like that. Although he's very clear when he said that the important was what was happening in the mind of the vagabond. Also, it is interesting because he criticized the indoctrination of the newspaper into the society, and this is a kind of preface to Walter Lippmann and Noam Chomsky when they speak about manufacturing consent, how society has been using the tool of the newspapers, the different media, in order to create networks of powers, and henceforth being able to submit the masses against their will. So if I find later the quote, I will mention that, but going for this idea of the kind of how people have been influenced by their surroundings, it's interesting that he uses the example of the children, and I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of his essay. He points that the children, when they are growing, their mind is whole and their eye has been unconquered. They see people, try and sentence them on their merits, not caring about consequences, but giving an independent and genuine verdict. In other words, he points how the children are behaving following their own nature. They are mature enough to have formed their own ideas but not so old to kind of follow the conventions of the society. So for instance, if you go to a big wedding and you see how there are like 200 people there, everybody wants to give a kiss to the kind of 5-6 years old child, and this child doesn't want to give kisses to everybody, it makes you wonder, maybe the child has a point. Why I have to kiss a lot of people that I don't really know, and so on, and they are forced to do so. And when you grow up, you have been shaped in order that to give 2 kisses, it is the correct way to kind of greet the other people. And obviously this happens in countries like Spain or France, but in the United Kingdom or Italy, you give the hand to every person, no matter the gender of anybody, but it is like the cultural kind of aspect of society. So for that reason, the kind of example of the kid growing up and how eventually he or she can fall upon the society, which is a prey, according to Emerson, who points, quote, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members," end quote. Society and everything that it surrounds the environment, for Emerson, is a kind of bad influence which can undermine our own instinct. Remember, nature for Emerson is the important aspect here. If nature can grow up, like the tree, being able to adapt itself to the inclemencies of the weather, like the rain, the snow, or the wind, we humans must be able also to adapt to the different difficulties that appear in our path. So for that reason, he criticized everybody that just follow with apathy the kind of dogmatic views that has been imposed upon them. For that reason, he points that the virtue is, in most requests, is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. In other words, self-reliance, which is the title of his essay, is the contrary to conformity. Self-reliance means that you need to adapt everything that you see around you. Your perception must be shaped according to your ideas of the nature, and you have to develop your knowledge through walking into nature, thinking about so, because about transcendentalism, it is very important that spirituality should come from the self and not to reading other people's books. Obviously, the clear example of that is religion. Like for transcendentalists, if you want to find your inner self, you don't need to read the Bible or the Quran or any kind of other holy scriptures, but rather you need to go into nature, think about spirituality, and take the time to meditate and understand what is your own nature. Maybe you want to be Christian or want to be Buddhist, Muslim, and any kind of religion or the world, but that doesn't mean that you need to follow their ideas or going to the church, to the mosque, the temple, and so on. You can become member of one of these religions as long as, according to Emerson, you follow your own ideas. I will finish the episode here because I want to talk more about his own perceptions about reality, because there's still much grain to kind of find still.